Hi everyone, this video is on how to diagnose ileocolic intussusception on ultrasound and hopefully not fall for its mimics. It's very important to accurately diagnose this because we only intervene via NMR reduction for ileocolic intussusceptions. So what is it? It's when the ileum telescopes into the cecum and can propagate beyond. Notice that it also drags mesenteric fat and sometimes lymph nodes along with it. Here's a normal gut signature on ultrasound. When we're lucky, we see all of these. Sometimes we just see 3 of them. The innermost layer is the mucosa, which is hyperechoic and blends in with the luminal contents, sometimes gas, etc. The next layer is hypoechoic, is the muscularis mucosa. Some people call this the deep mucosa. The next layer is hyperechoic, is the submucosa. After that, you have a hypoechoic muscularis propria, and then the serosa or the visceral peritoneum, which we don't always see because it just blends in with the adjacent fat. Notice that by itself, the normal gut signature, in this case of the terminal ileum, can look like a target sign. So being aware of this normal anatomy is important to not be faked out by just normal findings and calling this an intussusception. Here are the same layers on longitudinal view. This is from an article in Radiology that was published in 2013, where they found that the mesenteric fat within the intussusception, the thickness of it compared with the outer wall was always greater than 1 in ileocolic intussusceptions and less than 1 in small bowel intussusceptions. This is a graphic on how to measure it. You pick the transverse image where you see the thickest fat within the intussusception. You take that thickness and then get that and divide it by the outer wall thickness, which would be the cecum in ileocolics. Very important to note that in ileocolic intussusceptions, the age range is generally from 3 months to 3 years. Especially if the patient is older than 5, you have to question whether it's truly an ileocolic intussusception, and if it is truly bowel within bowel, then you have to pretty much assume there might be a lead point. The mean size for ileocolics is 2.6 centimeters. And here's an actual ultrasound image in transverse plane of the same areas that were measured. Again, this is the mesenteric fat, thickness, and then obviously just eyeballing that, you can appreciate that it's going to be thicker than the outer wall of the intussusception, right? And lymph nodes as well help out with diagnosing ileocolics if you see them, but not as helpful or specific as the fat being thicker than the outer wall of the intussusception. Here's an example of small bowel intussusception. These are usually transient, so seeing them appear and disappear during the exam will help kind of diagnose that. The mean size is smaller than the ileocolics, 1.5. So generally, if the intussusception is greater than 3, that's highly suspicious for ileocolic, less than 2, suspicious for just a small bowel intussusception. But again, if you see it disappear, then that's pretty much a clincher. This is an example of a 12 millimeter small bowel intussusception. No fat in this one at all. So it's not going to be ileocolic. And this one disappeared on repeat imaging. Here's another different patient with small bowel intussusception. Again, this was transient. And there was some fat in it, but see how it's flat and very scant. It's not going to be thicker, like with the maximum width this way compared with the outer wall of the intussusception. They measured it as 0.6, and I would argue that it's enough to just eyeball instead of actually putting the numbers in, just eyeballing the fat versus the outer wall to tell if it's greater than 1 or less than 1. And again, that's very accurate in terms of identifying ileocolics versus small bowel intussusceptions. Let's go over some mimics now that can trick us. So bowel wall thickening, in this case, this is a terminal ileitis case from a paper with associated inflammation. Here we can see a kind of muscular mucosal layer that is hypoechoic And then we have the submucosa, which is very thick, and then the muscular layer is proper after that. So bowel wall thickening can mimic intussusception. What's missing from here is that really thick fat within this lesion within the lumen. Okay, so again, fat is something you can hang your hat on. This has zero fat in it. If you scroll, you probably won't see an additional layer of a gut signature within the outer layer. It's just going to be one kind of layer or multi-layer gut signature instead of double, as in intussusceptions. You can see that the surrounding fat is hyperechoic in this terminal ileitis. Again, fat is the key. And here we just pretty much have the upper images, which is the terminal ileitis, as the normal bowel layers, just on steroids, really thick, but otherwise kind of preserved, and nothing extra, no bowel within bowel, no fat, more importantly. Here's another mimic, terminal ileitis with thick ileocecal valve, which is this part here. That's the valve that's hypoechoic edematous. Again, what's missing from this image? The fat is missing from this image. So it cannot be ileocolic intussusception without that really thick mesenteric fat within the lesion. And here's a side-by-side comparison of a true ileocolic intussusception. You actually have the ileum with its own gut signature, and then the cecum or colon as the outer wall. Again, really thick, just eyeballing this really thick fat, maybe some mesenteric nodes scattered, but the fat is what matters most. That thickness, just eyeballing, is thicker than the outer wall. That clinches the ileocolic intussusception diagnosis. Whereas here, the example of the terminal ileitis with an edematous and thick ileocecal valve, no fat whatsoever within the lumen. Another mimic is just feces that's pretty prominent, distending the colon, perhaps fecalized small bowel. So this is what it can look like. There's some free fluid outside. But again, compare that side by side by the ileocolic. Hopefully you have some good CNS from the tech. You can scroll up and down, and you probably will not find another gut signature within the lumen if it's not ileocolic intussusception. I understand this hyperechoic material of the feces might look like fat, but again, the CNS in this case would help and tease it out and not document any ileum within the colon, as in this ileocolic intussusception example. Another mimic potential will be perforated appendicitis with a complex collection, suspicious for abscess. Here we have that complex collection from this example from StatDX. There's also hyperemia that they were trying to show. But again, what's missing from inside the lumen? Well, a couple of things. You don't have the ileum. If you can again scroll up and down, you probably will not find gut signature within this abscess. And then again, the fat is missing from this abscess. So fat is really key and something we're trying to emphasize to increase our accuracy in diagnosing these, especially on call. And that's the end of the video. Thank you so much, and feel free to ask me any questions via email, Teams, or text.